issue that has perhaps dragged over the past years or over the past administration in Nigeria is the issue of restructuring. Nigerians have heavily criticized the Constitution, the 1999 Constitution as amended, and the manner in which it was constituted or put together. There have been efforts to amend to meet the yearnings of Nigerians. There have been efforts also about 4 different alterations that have been put into this present constitution, but the last was not successful in the 8th Assembly. Another constitution amendment is ongoing now, and civil society organizations are asking that the efforts on the process needs to be hastened before the 2023 political activities get more intense. There was a meeting today in Abuja organized by the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC. They said Nigeria is racing against time if the necessary fixes must be done before 2023 fully kicks off. Take a listen to the experts who spoke at the event.
We do know as civil society organizations that the issue of constitutional review is very critical. The 9th National Assembly has committed to review of the Constitution. The 9th National Assembly has also defined priority areas, and those priority areas include electoral reform, judicial reform, local government reform, and fourthly, women inclusion and participation. These constitution review committees are looking at all of this in a very incremental fashion, and it is us as civil society that have a major role to play in pushing as far as we can.
The subject of immunity. Some of us believe very strongly that there is need to amend section 308, I think that's the section, on immunity of the governor and his or her deputy, the immunity of the president and his or her vice. And some of us very strongly believe that that blanket immunity, even though it is for the duration of their tenure, is not consistent with current trends.
All right, you heard them there. Meanwhile, the call for restructuring has not stopped. Elder Statesman Chief Edwin Clark is asking that the ruling APC should consider implementing the report on true federalism, a committee's report headed by Governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai. Edwin Clark believes that that report needs to be looked into.
If the government in power in 2015 says that in our manifesto, restructuring of Nigeria for a better Nigeria is number 1, and you came to power in 2015, now we are in 2021, only 2 years more for you to go. You are not talking about your constitution. So your party said, look, let us put it in writing. It was in our manifesto. Let us set a committee to examine this issue of restructuring. And the party did it. What are they waiting for? Are they waiting for PDP to come into power before executing their own report? The National Assembly has been spending 1 billion naira every year on amending the Constitution of Nigeria. For years now, they've not been able to do so. So, if the APC is the party ruling Nigeria today, it means it has power under President Buhari to implement whatever they want to implement in the interest of Nigeria.
Now, Chief Edwin Clark there, Elder Statesman. Let's get some insight on this matter, because amending the Constitution is no joke. You know how much of controversies how much of division, how much of debate this has generated on key areas in the Constitution. The issue of security, a lot of people believe that amending the Constitution can help fix some of those areas. Issue of disagreement about sharing and allocation of resources in the country, a lot of people believe that fixing the Constitution will help amend it. So I'm being joined tonight by a senior advocate of Nigeria, Professor Epiphany Azinge. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
We are raising against time, isn't it, on this amendment?
Yes.
8th Assembly couldn't have it done. But if you look at what we face today as a people, how urgently do we need to fix this Constitution?
To a very large extent, I believe that there is every need for us to fix it as soon as possible. But I can say with some authority that a lot of work went into the Constitution review, because I played some part in that regard, and to that extent I'm in a position to speak authoritatively. And I can say that before September ending, a lot of work, wider in scope and dimension than any can imagine, and far wider than the NGOs are talking about. A lot of work has been done. Now, one was thinking that maybe moving forward by December, January, that it would have been done, and it is now for the National Assembly to invoke the provisions of Section 9 or 8, as the case may be, in order to drive home the process. I wouldn't know why there is a little bit of vacuum in the process at this point in time. But I'm still very optimistic that even if it is the whole 2022, the length and breadth of 2022, or even before the end of midterm 2022, I believe that a little bit of shove and the work will be done. And I believe that it is something that Nigerians will be very, very proud of and happy about. I also believe that one should also commend the 9th Assembly for the efforts made so far, for the intensity, the vigor, and the passion committed to the review so far. And one can say without equivocation that they've committed themselves to a very large extent in ensuring that so much will go into the review and so much likely to come out, as the case may be.
There are a lot of areas, though. People are talking about boundary adjustment, state creation. I'm not sure those are really the priority for this constitutional amendment. In fact, if you look at Section 8 and you see the process that will enable the National Assembly to effect or the alteration or the amendment or review of boundaries and state is a long process, which a lot of people think state creation might not be our priorities. But if you're talking about priorities, what are those critical priority areas since you're privy to those review?
Well, so much has been done in the area of the whittling down or rearranging the exclusive legislative list. The issue of state police resonated clearly, the role of traditional rulers, amongst others. Of course, you've heard that the issue of immunity for top officers, either governors or presidents and the rest of them, were also clearly mentioned, among so many. It is difficult for one. And of course, the state creation aspect of it is not completely ruled out, because the issue came up and it was dealt with, but of course in a way and manner that those of us who are not within, obviously, the umbrella of membership, were not in a position to know exactly the decisions taken. But have they actually looked at that seriously? I would say yes, they have. But we are not privy to some of the information, because at that point in time, we are not made to follow smoothly exactly what they were thinking of. So I can say that a lot of work is going on. And Nigerians, like I say, will be very, very surprised, because the intensity, the vigor, the intellectual work that had gone into it, and it's like both parties, or the major parties, all working together in concert. And these are people from across the divide. both in terms of representation and what have you, and people from different parts of the country coming together to say, yes, we vote for this, we believe in this, we agree with this. A lot of work has really gone in. I can tell you that authoritatively.
I mean, I attended some of the review sessions, conversations even around the issue of change of Nigeria's name. Some people were suggesting things like, I mean, a few suggestions came on what Nigeria's name should be changed into, whether or not we are okay with the name Nigeria. If you go into the issue of state creation, I'm not even sure there's so much of that agitation from the Southeast, because if you look at the way the nation is being divided into geopolitical zones, some Nigerians, eminent Nigerians have spoken about the fact that there are 5 states in the Southeast. The only state, the only region that has less than 6 states in the region. Does that come up prominently?
No, I want to say categorically that it would appear, from my knowledge of what is going on, Southeast is highly favored in the whole exercise going forward. I don't know what will play out on the floor of the National Assembly, but in the interim, I think preponderance of the views seem to suggest that Southeast deserves to be favored. Because,
even states like Ogun State, there are about 3 or 4 groups that came forward. Expire State, in fact, your state, Ibadan State. Those are ideas. These are states where you wonder that, maybe there shouldn't be agitation for state creation in those areas.
For many reasons. For many reasons. So many people obviously requested for states, but it is a normality in our system, in our environment, that people should always. But seriously speaking, some were considered to be very, very important, and I can tell you that one from Southeast or thereabouts seemed to resonate better than the others. I wouldn't know exactly how things will play out, like I said, when it gets back to the National Assembly, but suffice it to say that so far, so good. I believe that they've done their homework, and it is just for them to run away with it.
It's going to be interesting how some of these things play out. When they say when true equity meets, the first in time prevails. Whether or not the Southeast deserve it more than any other region of the country, or how this all plays out. But at the heart of the agitation for fixing this constitution is the issue of fairness, equity in this nation. How much of that consideration is being put? Because some of the strife that we see in this country today is based on the fact that some people feel aggrieved that they are not calculated properly into the scheme of things.
Like I said, it would appear that this time around the night assemblies seem to be getting it right. I wouldn't speak for them in terms of what they do in their respective chambers, but those who were nominated to work on the review outside the chambers, I believe that they've thrown everything away in terms of a public interest versus personal interest. I believe that everybody seems to be working in concert. Everything is thoroughly debated. They come to their decisions, and it is so clear to everybody. I believe that they seem to show that they are working in the overall interest of the country. And for me, that is very, very excellent, because hitherto, we've never seen anything of that sort. I keep praying that if what happened outside the National Assembly is obviously played back and successfully on the floors of the National Assembly, Nigerians will commend the 9th Assembly. I can say that authoritatively.
Because, the essence of some theorists, jurists will argue that the essence of the law is to make everybody feel okay, to make the society feel all right, let everybody feel, properly integrated. And if the constitution is fixed without consideration of how the entirety of the people feel calculated into the scheme of things, if our constitution cannot give the peace and order that we deserve, I'm not sure that effort makes any sense. But I'd like to ask you, in the area of security, how much of that review can help fix some of the problems we're facing right now?
Well, it's difficult to say categorically, but a lot of emphasis on whether or not there will be state police. I believe that is being resolved in the affirmative, that a time has come for the state police. I believe that there are so many other areas in that regard that seem to have been touched upon. And one can say without equivocation, I don't think anything has been said about the military hierarchy or any of those things. But in terms of police, I believe the emphasis of the Ninth Assembly and those who are working on the review of the Constitution has been on what do we do with the police. And I think they've resolved one way or the other that there is need for state police. And we should whittle down the gamut as we have it. The only challenge is the modalities and how the structure can now work out. Whether the structure will still be tied to the apron string of the Inspector General of Police, or whether there should be other chain of commands here and there. These are the areas that they are trying to tinker with. But whether they've come to such an agreement, they have. And I believe that certainly to a very large extent will impact on the security architecture of this country at that level. I'm not talking about the military level, but at the police level. I believe that if we're able to get it right around that level, then obviously we can put certain things in check, and that certainly will impact positively on the security architecture of this country.
Another area will be what the federal government, I mean, this should be a federal state that we're running. But some people will say, if you look at it, it's more like a quasi-unitary federal system. I mean, sometimes it looks like a unitary state, sometimes it looks like a federal state. But the federating unit wants more power. That is the norm in the principles and concept of federalism. You're talking about the exclusive legislative list and the concurrent, and the powers of the federal and the powers of the center and the powers of the federating unit. Is that also being tinkered with? Is there adjustment to whittle down the power of the center?
Yeah, well, not whittling down, but doing the right thing. Because the emphasis should be on what do we call true federalism. Federalism properly so-called. It depends. Regardless of your definition, regardless of your perspective, regardless of where you're coming from, there are certain fundamentals that we cannot toy with. I.e. that, of course, the states should have some level of authority in any federal system. It does appear that the founding fathers of the 1999 Constitution missed the point somewhere along the line. And to that extent, this is the time to rebalance and restructure as the case may be. Now, such areas have come up. Which do we give to the state? Which do we leave for the federal government? To that extent, I believe that it is not complete takeaway. It is a question of whittling down to some extent, and in truism, what ordinarily should belong to the state. I believe that is what they are tinkering with, and at the end of the day, you will listen to robust arguments, very, very well considered opinions on some of these issues that you cannot help but say, yes, this is the way forward. And if you are called upon to vote on the floor of the assembly, I believe that you will vote out of persuasion rather than out of compulsion.
Because one of the issues that came up when the conversation around the powers of the states and the powers of the center is the arbitrariness that can come into play when states are given more power, like the issue of state policing. But does it bother you, Prof, if a state, a people have, and that's how it's captured in the Constitution rightly, you have a deposit, a natural deposit, right under your feet, right in your village, right in your backyard. Even the water that flows around your backyard, in your community, you don't have power over it. The natural resource under your feet, you don't have power over it. You cannot exploit it. It belongs to the center. And that's why people say, for equity's sake, for the sake of competition, for the sake of the state being able to take their destiny into their hands, is that kind of calculation or that kind of equation going to be balanced in this review too?
Well, I wouldn't say yes that I've heard about that it has resonated. Seriously, I don't think so. Well, we're all students of the issue of resource control flowing from 1999 with the court cases amongst so many other things. And then, of course, the agitations and the evolution of militancy and militants over a period of time, the cry of the Niger Delta region. We are all students of that. But I believe that at this point in time, it would appear from the thinking of the people of the National Assembly that it is not something they are likely to handle and handle properly.
Because, Prof, I mean, in the real sense, if you ask me, as a political journalist, one thing that I've discovered is the fact that the states, I've reported a lot of the time that some states are insolvent. Some states cannot pay salaries. Some states, without the bowls and their calabashes up to the center every month, they cannot serve their people. And that is at the center of how a federal state, go to the United States, go to Canada, Australia, South Africa. I mean, most of the federal states that you have across the world, what obtains, they have the ability to take their own destiny, to be able to take the economy under their feet, to be able to take the resource under their feet and be able to use it for their own people. But in case of Nigeria, that's not the case.
Well, you are talking to the converted in the regard that it would appear that the lack of buoyancy on the part of so many of those states seem to be a hindrance to the emergence of true resource control, which is also an offshoot of true federalism. That seems to be the challenge, because it would appear that if you take away the resources and hand them over to the states, then automatically the issue of federal allocation and what have you, and the idea of some of the states not being buoyant enough, most of those states will go bankrupt. They will disappear. They cannot exist as a state. So it would appear that, without saying so politically, what Nigeria is trying to do is to use some of the resources from those buoyant states in order to show off the less buoyant one. Should that be the case? I wouldn't say yes.
Isn't that the competition? Isn't that the contest about the VAT, Prof?
Oh, exactly.
And this has come over and over again.
Should that be the case? I wouldn't say so. Now, what do we do in what do we do in reality? Because people agitate for state creation, can we constitutionally extinguish some of the states in that regard? Perhaps people may start thinking that way. If a state is not buoyant, what, for God's sake, is the state existing for? Extinguish that state, delete the state constitutionally. So, but we have not thought about that. We have talked about alteration of the constitution. We have talked about creation of states, but we have not talked about how we can extinguish a state that is not up and doing and is not capable of running as a state.
The Constitution did not
The Constitution did not
Section 8, which deals with
Section 8 only talked about the creation of states
and extension of boundaries,
exactly,
or the adjustment of boundaries.
Fine. So we did not, for any reason, imagine or configure
Prof,
that there could well come a time when the idea will be, how do we stop a state from existing?
In fact,
constitutionally,
if you look at the language in Section 9 about the alteration of Section 8,
yeah,
it tells you how difficult it is.
Of course it is difficult. Where do you get the request from?
Yeah.
To thought. How do you get a referendum of the people to thought? And how do you get a resolution of the House of Assembly? And so on and so forth. As the case may be, it is a very difficult, laborious process. How do you achieve that? But it will be worse trying to reverse the status quo in sense of trying to get a state that is already in existence, listed by the Constitution, out of existence. That will be a milestone.
You perhaps have agitated the minds of those who believe that this Constitution is a contraption.
Well,
for those who...
yes, it may well be. I wouldn't say so authoritatively, but the truth of the matter is that the Constitution is in operation.
Yeah.
And any other thing that has to happen must be within the framework of this Constitution.
Unfortunately, it is a rigid Constitution.
It
it's
is
not
indeed.
so much difficult. I mean, it gives you
indeed.
very difficult...
So when you hear people say everything about the Constitution not being made, I believe that was late in the day. This is the Constitution we know.
And this, our fate and our destiny.
Anything that we need to do.
For those who are asking that the best way to restructure is to jettison this, look at the Confab report and see how we can birth a proper people's constitution. How easy could that be?
No, certainly not easy. Certainly not easy, because we have a constitution in place, we have a National Assembly in place, amongst others. There are so many beautiful things contained in the Constitutional Conference report. So many beautiful things.
But how can that be infused? Can it be infused?
By injecting them. If there are areas where you need to have a bill in place in order to bring it into law, then let the National Assembly do so. And I believe I can tell you categorically. But anytime you look at the reports of the Constitutional Conference 2014, you see that now and then